Welcome to Autism ADHD TV. It is the place to be for parents and professionals. I'm your host, Holly Blanc Moses, the mom psychologist who gets it. We dive into all kinds of important information like behavior, social skills, and learning. All right, let's get started. Welcome, Dr. Tara Regan.
Hey, Holly, so great to be back for the third time.
I'm so excited you're here. One of my very favorite people to interview. So only you and Dr. Temple Grandin have been on 3 times on the Autism ADHD podcast. So you are in good company. I'm going to introduce you really quick. So Dr. Regan is the executive director and founder of Autism Growing Up, an online nonprofit creating autism resources for across the lifespan. She's a sibling to 2 autistic adult brothers and has been working in the autism community for over a decade through a variety of professional roles, from the direct care to research in schools. Whether in the online community or working within the resource center at AGU, her goal is to facilitate the free flow of ideas, information, and inspiration between stakeholders to support the autism community growing up, which is so great. Again, I'm thrilled that you're here today, and we're talking about siblings. And siblings aren't often, you don't hear much about them, and all the information and the groups and everything. So we know it's important, though, because we hear from parents that siblings are struggling, and sometimes, siblings are also differently wired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely an increase. Yeah, this part's like the most research part is like there's an increase in likelihood of having another neurodivergent sibling after one.
Exactly. And so there are a lot of variables that we need to consider when we're discussing siblings. And again, siblings might be differently wired in a different kind of way, or they may be neurotypical, but there are things that impact them. And again, not blaming the differently wired child, of course, because there's no blame there, not blaming parents, but I think there's a lot of balancing that needs to happen. And sometimes it doesn't go as well as we want it to. And sometimes we're just doing the best that we can.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a couple of things that we're going to chat about today, and one of them being time. What was your experience growing up with 2 autistic brothers and the time that was managed within your family?
Yeah, so I think our family is pretty unique in that, although I do hear from time to time, and especially in research, that like there are multiple autistic children in a family or neurodivergent children. And so our family is also unique in that it's like 2 girls and 2 boys. There's 4 kids. So that seems like a large family even by today's standards. So so I'm the oldest sibling. I can give you more context in terms of the ages, and that can kind of give you an understanding of kind of, I guess, the differences between even myself and my sister and the relationships and dynamics within all of us. So yeah, I'm the oldest. My brother Tyler is next in line, and he is going to be turning he's going to be turning 30 in January. He was born in 1992, so I can't believe that. And then my sister Tasha, she was born in 98, so I think she's 23. I'm like counting backwards now. I've lost track of everyone's ages as we get older. And then my youngest brother Tanner, actually, as of this recording, he just turned 22 yesterday on November 16th.
Well, happy birthday to Tanner. That's
happy belated birthday to him. So as you can tell, there is quite an age gap between the oldest 2 and the youngest 2. And so my parents had my brother Tyler and me for a number of years before my youngest 2 siblings were born, and they were kind of born back to back. And that really shaped my childhood very differently, because I was like about 9 and 8 years old when my youngest siblings were born. And so from there on, I kind of ended up taking on this more of a caregiver role. In my preteen years up until now, it's just been really shaped by that time period of taking care of my siblings and having to take on a little bit more responsibility as the eldest sibling who is non-autistic. Just in terms of supporting my brother's needs on a day-to-day basis. And I really focus on like developing relationships with my brothers. I'm very close with them. Even up until now, I work with my brothers. They both receive services through the Medicaid waiver, and I provide weekly respite support to my brothers. So they come over to my house actually 2 times a week, because I also do other services with them through the Medicaid waiver, community living supports. And so we work on goals together. So I just love the time we get to spend together. And I especially am grateful that I get to do that through their services too. So as you can tell, it's really shaped my background and my professional interests. And I really do identify as a sibling so much. Autism means so much to me in my life. My brothers are everything.
And you mentioned that it really did shape your life. Not only growing up with them and maybe taking on more of a caregiver role than other neurotypical siblings would. And then also, this is your career as well and your research.
Yeah, it's always very close to the front of my mind when I'm working on just anything I'm doing. I think it's also been impactful in decisions I've made on a career-focused level. I was going down I got my PhD, so I was working on this research-focused track, but my brother Tyler, actually, he was diagnosed with cancer in my final year of my PhD program. And that really shifted things for me in terms of thinking about what resources are actually out there, and wanting to become more of a community-based professional. And so that's why I ended up starting my nonprofit, to create more resources for families that are navigating adulthood and the lifespan. So it's always there.
When we talk about time, because I know that you have had experience talking to other siblings as well, something that I see in my practice is some siblings will feel like they're, the child with ADHD or the child who's been diagnosed with autism gets more time with their parent. And I think this is hard for parents to balance, right? We want to make sure that our kids feel loved and cared for, and we want to make sure they have the time they need, but it really is a different situation when you have a child who needs more supports throughout the day, and more supports does in many ways equal more time.
Yes, I agree with that. And I can relate to that in so many different levels too. And I think my parents did a very good job of, of course, acknowledging like that parent guilt that happens related to that, because of course they feel that in terms of the time they're spending and the needs. I think the other big thing the thing that they did a good job on originally was just like making sure that they do spend quality time with myself and my sister away from my brothers too. So we were able to feel like our needs were being met as well, and also have a better understanding of my parents' relationship to my autistic brothers, and having a better understanding of what their needs are. And it's okay that we do spend more time on their needs as a family, because we're also getting our needs met.
Right. And it can be very difficult to explain, I think especially to a younger child, that yes, we do need to spend time more with your sibling because they have more needs, but sometimes that can feel kind of hard.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, on a day-to-day basis, you may feel like you have a better balance of it. And then other times you're like, oh, I really missed that chance too. Because I definitely have memories of my parents not always being able to attend certain events, like not always being able to go to my basketball games or to a band concert with me. This supported me when I played clarinet back in the day. But I think they were always like, I think as I got older, it became easier to explain, in addition to model that quality time with me, of we will try to prioritize you with those bigger events. And it's really a tough conversation, no matter what.
That is a tough conversation because, and a lot of times it feels like time is associated with amount of love, and I think that's the case mostly, well, for all of us, right? No matter what our ages are. But I think in particular for kids, that just seems easy, right? Like, if you love me, then, right, you would be going to this, but we all know that it's not that simple. I know that we have our oldest son, who's 17. He has therapy every day after school. And I think sometimes our younger son, we are very much a part of that therapy. We're in that therapy with him. And our other son is like playing video games, with having to kind of be on his own, during those times. And then we do try to spend time with our younger son, but it's incredibly difficult. And I think a lot of parents will understand this that are watching or listening, to have childcare for our oldest autistic son. So it's not, it's not like you can call a babysitter, it doesn't really work that way. And family members, it also doesn't work that way in our family, that we can call them up and say, we'd like to spend time with one of our kids. Can you please watch our oldest? So, it really isn't so easy, like as a parent, to even figure out how to get that one-on-one time with the siblings apart. But we do try, we try the best that we can, get on, a video game with our youngest, and build in Minecraft, and take him fishing sometimes on his own. But we'll have to kind of divide, the parents, like my husband and I can't go together. We have to figure out how to do that separately. And I know for single parents that can be, even more challenging, obviously.
I was just going to say that would be even more. I think my parents, because they were together and we had a 2-parent household, it was easy for them to divide it up. So I definitely spent a lot of time with my dad, and then sometimes I would spend time with my mom, but it was more so at home in relationship to my brothers, because she was like their main caregiver at home.
Right. And again, as a single parent, I can't even imagine, what that would be like. I really can't, because it's already difficult in a two-parent household. So, managing that time and figuring it out and being creative, and how can you give each child their individual time, and really having to work on that, because it's hard to do, but it's important. And I think having that conversation as early as you can, even though, again, it might be uncomfortable with the siblings, is, I want to spend time with you. Your other sibling, they have a lot of supports, they have a lot of needs, but I want to make sure that that I do want to spend time with you. Let's figure out how we can do that. And it could be at home, right? Getting creative. Maybe, you're unable to get a caregiver to watch your child. Maybe it's just something special you're going to do at home with them.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I said, with my mom having to be home because that's where we had to be. And in terms of there were just so many kids that she has to take care of. And she was also working from home at the time. She was running a child care program out of the house back in the day when we were all growing up. And so we really had no other choice just to be home with her. And she did a great job of maybe she would set up some independent activities for my autistic brothers to be a part of, to do on their own, so they can also spend some time learning and practicing their own leisure skills and choice time types of things. And then we would be able to be maybe in a separate room, or just down the hallway in the same space, and be able to still spend time together.
Definitely. Yeah. Another thing to consider is access to the community, because sometimes certain activities in the community might be difficult for a child with severe ADHD, or a child who is autistic. and figuring out how to access the community in a way that works for them. I know sometimes certain environments have uncomfortable lighting and noises and all of those things, but also needing to expose your other children to parts of the community as well. Did you ever have that experience where, well, you mentioned earlier that maybe games that you were in, they weren't able to attend?
Right. They always were very purposeful in making sure I go do all of those activities I'm interested in. They always enrolled me in sports or piano or music or anything that I was really interested in. They made sure I had those lessons, went to those classes, got to participate in teams, whatever I wanted to do there was or whatever I was interested in. So that was always such a great component there. I think in terms of supporting and thinking about the whole family going out into the community, that's always something that comes up with families I'm working with too, of like, how can we still go all out as a family? And for siblings to understand the limiting environments or opportunities to go out in the community, it's also just a form of a conversation with them too. They eventually get it too, like, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't go to grocery shopping all together on Sundays because that is like the busiest time of the week to go. So we also ended up splitting up activities that way too, between my parents and myself.
Yeah, and that makes sense. We do our sometimes we'll do our shopping on a Monday evening.
That's such a good plan.
Right, where we can all go together.
Yeah.
And again, that's two parents.
Mm-hmm.
Right, with two kids, and they might be running around, and our oldest, he's got his headphones on and he wants to go to look at his, interests there. So we're just, making sure that we can help everybody have a good time, but also then teaching those skills. Yes. Right, at the same time. We want to teach the skills that they need to be, independent as possible, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes, being in the community isn't so easy. And that includes schools, that includes the store, that includes lots of places. And sometimes, a sibling can feel uncomfortable in different places. I know we went to Target not long ago, and our oldest works at McDonald's, and he gets paid on a debit card. Oh. Yeah, it's really cool, actually. So he has his debit card. I hold on to it until he decides what he wants to get, and we talk about the amount of money and everything. And there was some confusion about he had purchased some headphones, which he's really into headphones, the day before. And, sometimes there's a little lapse between it showing up in your account. Yeah. And so we purchased a Gab wireless phone, which I'm a big fan of because it doesn't have a browser. But what you can do is call the debit card and get your balance. Okay. So while we were in Target's very busy, as you know, it's like the place to go, get all your stuff. He had called to get his balance, what I wasn't aware of, and he didn't understand why there was money taken out that day. Like his balance was different from the day before. He didn't understand there was a little bit of a delay there. And honestly, I forgot about that part, teaching him that part. So that's on me. But he was very upset in the checkout line, yelling, screaming. He was saying I stole his money. Oh, wow. Because I had the card on me, and our youngest was pretty embarrassed by this whole thing. And of course I'm like, okay, let's calm down,
right.
Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course everyone's stopping to look, right? Because they want to know what's happening. So there are things that come up, I think, with siblings where they don't quite understand what's happening. They see all the people looking, and that can be uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely have witnessed our fair share of meltdowns in public, and it can, or like even just stares in terms of navigating like a different kind of social nuance. Like they've never experienced someone having echolalia. Like my brother Tyler will repeat back what the other person is saying at the store. And so sometimes we do get a little bit of a look, but then hopefully they adjust and get used to my brother being there. But in terms of that aspect, in terms of navigating meltdowns, yeah, I think siblings who, I think the proactive piece that we talked about is really critical, like planning out ahead of like going to the store ahead of time, or at a time that's not so busy, or knowing that it can be more successful environment if we go at a certain time, but also proactively. I know in the moment you can't always, because you are working with your oldest as you're trying to calm him down, but then at the moment you cannot necessarily, you're like, can't be at two places at once trying to bring in your youngest son into the mix, or trying to calm him down too, because maybe he is feeling a little bit like you said, embarrassed. So it sounds like it would end up being like a conversation about like, how do we navigate meltdowns as a family? And that's something I ended up having to take on a little bit myself too, because sometimes my brothers do play off of each other. And sometimes we do have two meltdowns happening at once, because it can be, they get stressed off of each other. And so what my parents ended up doing with me is like, I help support one brother or the other while they work with the other one to help calm him down too.
Yeah, and that's a lot of responsibility for a child.
That's true, especially for a child at a certain age, to call on that type of sense of, oh, you have to take some responsibility here, is really difficult. So some families will have to navigate that in a different way. In terms of maybe having conversations about like what other community members may do in those types of situations, and what can you do to help prevent embarrassment and help understand why a meltdown is happening. And sometimes other people will stare, and it's always really hard, you know, like as family members, it's really, there's just still so much stigma in the community, and it's hard to avoid those situations.
It is. And I think, again, having those conversations with all of the siblings is helpful. For instance, if we go to a movie, it's an event, right?
Yeah.
we don't do it often. And so our oldest son does want to go, but if it becomes too loud, depending on what's happening in the movie, because sometimes the vibrations and the sounds are something that's exciting for him, and sometimes it's overwhelming. So we're not quite sure, because we haven't been to see the particular film, before. So we're not sure. So we kind of prepare. And if he wants to leave because he is safe, as far as he's not running anymore, he's not doing those kinds of things. So he'll have his phone that he can text with friends. He'll have his earphones if he decides that he wants to kind of pace in the hallway. That's okay too.
Yeah.
While we're in there, because we don't want to have our youngest son leave, but we also know our oldest son is safe, and we also don't want him to be uncomfortable and make him stay within an uncomfortable environment. Right. So it's kind of balancing, all of those things for sure. Something that does come up quite a bit can be peer related. And I know some siblings will tell me that, some kids will say cruel things or mean things. And that may lead to kind of embarrassment for that sibling, almost some resentment for that sibling, possibly. And again, not because they're bad kids, but because they're human, they're kids. They're going to have all these experiences just like adults do. When I recall those situations, and there have been many, that we were in this neighborhood at one point, and our youngest son's best neighborhood buddy lived 2 houses down, and he had a birthday party, and it was pretty clear that there was a birthday party going on in their backyard. They had balloons. We knew it was his birthday, and our youngest was crying because he wasn't invited.
Oh my gosh.
And so he went and asked his buddy, like, why wasn't I invited to your birthday party? And the child said, because my parents didn't want to invite your brother. So it's been, we moved, by the way, we actually moved from that neighborhood for a few reasons, that they were not very accepting for our son, not just that one situation. But it was really hard explaining to him, because I didn't quite get it either. But then that discomfort where, parent to parent, how do you have that discussion? It's not so easy.
That sounds there's so many things to unpack there. Oh my gosh. I am also, you rarely hear the reason why someone, I also wanted to know that, why someone did not invite. So your son's friend was really like forthcoming with that information. Usually we're always like guessing, like, why were we not invited to this? And we do eventually come to the conclusion, oh, it's because X, Y, or Z related to our autistic child. And it's always such a negative, disappointing experience when you discover that about a peer. And I think with siblings, and I know parents are always so worried about that rippling effect. And I think as a sibling, there is a little bit of a silver lining to the fact that you learn about people a lot quicker than your neurotypical peers do, in terms of learning how to trust certain people, looking for people who are a good safe space that you feel comfortable bringing home, and getting to know your sibling. You get to know people really, really quickly, and what to look for in a friend.
That's true too. It's definitely learning the hard way.
You learn the hard way, which is, I wish we never have to learn that way, because that really shows a lot of people's true colors, when in fact they could be a great friend in many other ways too. So many people are so complicated, but they also eventually do learn too and change their attitudes. So that's also another aspect to consider too with peers and friendships. Like even going back to a previous conversation we've had on your podcast, is thinking about peers and friendships in terms of training and working and teaching neurotypical peers how to interact with autistic and neurodivergent kids.
Absolutely. And I think that's another role parents take on.
Yeah.
Right. Is how can we do that? And it can be hard. And the comments that peers make, because again, you have this sort of pull, is what I hear from the patients that I see, is that I want to protect my sibling, and almost to the point where it's beyond what most neurotypical kids think of protection, right? Like, I want to protect my sibling, but also I'm a little bit resentful, or I wish I could get more time with my parents, or I wish that there was more money to support my interests, but sometimes that has to go towards supports. So, I mean, there's just a lot of things. I think a lot of feelings, a lot of pull, a lot of confusion sometimes that can come up for siblings, for sure. And, it's interesting. My son he's at a different school right now, my youngest son, but growing up, they went to the same school, and one being older than the other. And my oldest son was kicked out of that school, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
So that was an experience. But my youngest son continued to go there, and then he became my oldest son's brother. Oh, didn't your brother get kicked out? Wasn't your brother the more annoying, and it was really hard. Because
people recognized his name and
right.
That thought. That's so hard to hear. So hard to hear as a sibling. Oh my gosh.
When we think about the siblings, right? And again, oftentimes they have needs, like my youngest son has needs as well, that he's not neurotypical either, but he's not autistic. So it's figuring out how to manage. And I think the best that we can as parents, and like you were saying earlier, is be prepared as possible, have those conversations earlier than you even think you need to, and explain them in a way that you feel like your other children will understand,
Mhm.
depending on their age and also their abilities, and trying to figure out how to manage their access to their friends and having their own time. That's something we've definitely tried to do, is have them have friend time separately.
Mm.
Our youngest son has said before, oh, we can all go together. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather just be with them and not have my older brother there. And what it's good is to be able to have that open communication to where they can tell you that they feel like they can express their needs and wants to you as a parent.
That is so key. And that's such an important aspect of growing up, is that open communication and learning how to access maybe different coping skills in those moments when everyone is all together and something is happening. And same thing with like learning how to co-regulate in that moment too, when we are feeling disappointed or embarrassed or stressed out too. I think that's also a skill that they will learn very early on.
Definitely.
Another,
And
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I think it's really important too, and you and I were chatting about this, the importance of understanding there are others like you out there, right? So if siblings, just like parents, want to, chat with other parents who get it, it can be really important for siblings to have something similar, because they won't feel so alone in their experience.
Mhm. Yeah, that was exactly what I was just about to say, was what can be a game changer is finding a sibling, another sibling, or a sibling group of friends, because that can be so eye-opening and such a great connector. And it can be difficult to find those siblings, but you can even just start with your autistic child or neurodivergent child's class and see if they have any siblings right around the same age and coordinate from there.
That's a really good idea. And again, thinking about what we need, and we seek them out. We seek, in my Facebook parenting group, right?
Mhm.
There's a bunch of people, we're really seeking out connection with
Yes.
others who understand. And that is just as important for our other kids.
Hmm. Yeah, because they could help them work through a lot of those feelings, because they feel like, oh, they are being heard and felt by somebody else as well, too.
Exactly. So, Tara, tell us, because I know the community is also already familiar with you, but tell us again how you support the community and how they can find more information about you.
Yeah, sure thing. So everything I do is housed on our website, autismgrownup.com. And yeah, so we're a nonprofit creating autism resources for across the lifespan for all members of one support network, including siblings and family members. And one of the main things we do there is we have a lifespan toolbox. That's our free resource library of a variety of toolkits related to the lifespan. So, like, we have toolkits on self advocacy, getting a job, personal care. And we have like these really neat symbols within each of them that are pointing out to different members of a group, like family members, of things to keep an eye on and think about. I really love those. Those are free resources. And then we also have other types of resources like visual supports, like different post-it notes and sequencing cards for life skills and those types of things. So that is like all of my time right now. I love creating those resources for families and autistics of any age and related professionals.
So great. And I encourage everyone who is watching and listening to go over to Autism Grown Up, because I know that, and again, as a parent and a professional, there's information kind of everywhere, and it can be pretty overwhelming. But
Yes.
what's lovely about the way you present your resources is it's all there. It's what you need in one place, which is really exciting. So I definitely recommend going to check it out. And I will make sure to include the link in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you so much for coming on again
Thank
to
you.
chat with me about this important topic.
Yeah, thanks for having me. There's so much to get into. I mean, even adult siblings is a whole nother topic on its own too.
It really is. And maybe you can come back on again and talk about that, because this is lifelong, right?
Mhm.
This isn't just kids grow up. And what does that look like in terms of support? And definitely it's going to look different as people age, for sure. So thank you again for all of your work. And again, I encourage everyone to go over and check out Autism Grown Up.
Well, thanks, Holly. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks, Tara. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to click that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like this episode, please share it with someone. It may just be what they need to watch today. If you're a parent, I'd love if you came on over and joined our Facebook group, Autism ADHD Group for Parents. If you're a therapist or educator, come on over to our group, Autism ADHD Group for Therapists and Educators. You're going to find those links right down there in the notes. Thanks so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
All content provided is protected under applicable copyright, patent, trademark, and other proprietary rights. All content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. No content is intended to be a substitute for professional medical or psychological diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Information provided does not create an agreement for service between Holly Blanc Moses Crossvine Clinical Group, the interviewee, Holly Blanc Moses LLC, and the recipient. Consult your physician regarding the applicability of any opinions or recommendations with respect to your symptoms or medical condition, or the symptoms or medical condition of your family member. Children or adults who show signs of dangerous behavior toward themselves and/or others should be placed immediately under the care of a qualified professional.